You know, it's funny how some news stories just pop up and make you go, wait, what?
Yeah. What's got your eye?
This whole thing about the U.S. maybe restricting visas for Indian travel agencies next May,
Hmm.
it landed unexpectedly.
Yes.
I saw that. Feels like a bit of a wrinkle, doesn't it, between two countries that usually, project this strong partnership image.
Absolutely.
Uh,
And on the surface, it might look like just a minor policy change,
right.
but it really pulls back the curtain on something much more complex. It's tied directly into the U.S. efforts on undocumented immigration.
Okay.
And India is, well, increasingly part of that whole discussion.
Right. And for you listening, maybe you're juggling a lot, trying to keep up with important global stuff without getting lost in the weeds.
Hmm.
Well, that's exactly why we're doing this deep dive. We're not here to just throw data at you.
No.
It's about getting to the heart of it. Think of us as helping you connect the dots.
And my job here is to kind of sketch out that bigger picture, link these events, and really explore the why behind it all and why it matters.
Okay.
So our mission today basically is to unpack why the U.S. is looking at this, what it tells us about migration from India, and honestly, why you should care if you're interested in global trends and where India stands.
Okay, let's dive right in then. These potential visa restrictions? They didn't just appear randomly, did they? They're part of a bigger picture in the U.S.
Not at all. No, they fit squarely into a longer-term U.S. strategy, particularly under the previous administration, aimed at, well, curbing unauthorized immigration.
Right.
And when you look at the numbers,
Yeah.
it's actually quite stark. As of 2022, the estimate was around 725,000 undocumented individuals from India living in the U.S.
Wow, 725,000.
Yeah, that number makes India the third largest source country right after Mexico and El Salvador.
That's a huge number. I knew it was an issue, but I didn't realize the scale.
Exactly. And it's not just a statistic, right? It represents a significant, well, a brain drain, potentially, but also maybe points to issues back home.
Yeah.
Job markets, opportunities.
Yeah, it makes you wonder about economic inclusion, doesn't it?
It really does.
Okay, so you can see why the U.S. is paying attention. But why is this such a big deal for India? I mean, people are just looking for better lives, right?
Well, yes, the individual motivation is often about seeking better opportunities. That's fundamental.
Mm.
But having such a large number of citizens living without legal status elsewhere,
Mhm.
that has real implications for India's global image.
How so?
Think about it. India's pushing hard on the world stage, G20 host, tech powerhouse, growing economy, all that.
Right.
This narrative of large-scale irregular migration can kind of tarnish that image. It creates a counter-narrative, suggesting that despite progress, many feel they have to leave, even illegally.
That's a really interesting point, like a shadow on the India shining story.
Sort of, yeah.
Okay, so people are looking for better opportunities. Are they coming from specific places in India? And what's really pushing them to take these huge risks?
Yeah, the data points pretty clearly to a few key regions. Gujarat, Punjab, and Haryana seem to be major sources.
Okay.
And the reasons? It usually boils down to economics, lack of jobs, or jobs with really low wages, and this powerful belief, this hope that life is just fundamentally better abroad, especially in the U.S.
It's the classic push-pull factors then. Lack of opportunity pushing them out, the perceived promise pulling them in.
Exactly. And the fact that people are willing to risk so much tells you a lot about how limited they feel their options are at home. It's quite a commentary on regional disparities.
And this desperation leads them to the donkey route, right?
Yeah.
The name sounds almost quaint, but the reality is anything but.
Anything but. Donkey ride is just a term for these incredibly dangerous, often illegal paths to the U.S.
How do they work?
Typically, it involves long, difficult journeys through South America, maybe the Caribbean, aiming for the U.S.-Mexico border.
Sounds perilous.
Extremely. You're talking risks of detention, deportation, getting ripped off, or worse, by traffickers, ending up stranded. It's incredibly hazardous.
And people are paying huge sums for this. You hear figures like, what, 25 to 70 lakhs? That's like 30,000 to 85,000 US dollars?
Yeah, staggering amounts. Often life savings or money borrowed at huge interest. They're paying these, well, let's call them unscrupulous agents.
So it's a massive financial gamble on top of all the physical danger.
It is. And these agents, they sell a dream. They paint this rosy picture of the U.S., downplaying or just lying about the risks involved.
You're exploiting desperation, basically.
Absolutely. Capitalizing on that intense desire for something better, feeding on the lack of local opportunities.
It's hard to wrap your head around the level of desperation needed to take that leap. Risking everything. It makes you really think about the conditions they must be leaving behind.
It's deeply concerning, yeah. And it's this whole situation, this rising number of people trying to enter the U.S. this way that directly leads to the U.S. crackdown we're seeing.
Right. Which brings us back to the U.S. response. The previous administration, their stance on immigration was known for being pretty firm, let's say.
That's putting it mildly. Yes, their policies were generally quite strict, very direct.
So these potential visa restrictions on travel agencies, it's basically a message to India.
A very clear one.
Mhm.
It's the U.S. saying, look, we need you to do more to control this flow of irregular migration from your country. It's diplomatic leverage, really.
What could happen to the agencies themselves if these restrictions come in? Bad news for business, I assume.
Oh, absolutely. If an agency is found to be involved, knowingly or negligently, the consequences could be severe.
Like what?
Well, the visa restrictions themselves, obviously, but also massive damage to their reputation, loss of legitimate business, potentially even being shut down legally.
Wow.
It really puts the pressure on legitimate agencies to be incredibly careful, to vet everything meticulously. They need to really step up their due diligence.
Makes sense. Now, how has India responded officially? I know they say they oppose illegal migration.
They do. India consistently states its opposition and says it will cooperate with repatriations.
Oh, there sounds like a but coming.
Well, there often seems to be a gap between the statements and, let's say, effective action on the ground, especially when it comes to tackling those root causes we talked about, the economic factors driving people to leave.
And what about regulating the agents? That seems key.
It is key. Right now, the Ministry of Tourism has a voluntary approval scheme.
Voluntary?
Yeah. And clearly, given the scale of this, voluntary isn't cutting it.
Doesn't sound like it.
What's really needed is mandatory certification, strict laws, rigorous enforcement, real oversight for all travel agencies. Without that, the dodgy operators just keep finding ways.
It's like trying to plug a leaky dam with chewing gum if it's just voluntary. And what about the people who get deported? You mentioned their treatment.
Right. That's another critical area.
Yeah.
India really needs to advocate strongly for the humane treatment of its citizens during deportation.
What does that involve?
Things like ensuring they're flown back on civilian planes, not, military cargo flights.
Yeah.
Making sure they get appropriate food, avoiding unnecessary restraints.
Basic dignity, really.
Exactly. It's a humanitarian issue, but it's also about national pride, about how India looks after its citizens, even in difficult circumstances.
Let's go back to these rogue agents for a second. You mentioned organized crime. How do they operate? How do they fool so many people?
They operate in the shadows, outside the legal system, often using social media, WhatsApp, reaching people directly with these false promises, easy visas, great jobs in the U.S.
Still in a fantasy.
Totally. They handle fake documents, arrange the dangerous travel logistics. It's a whole illicit operation. And the money involved, sometimes 20, 50 lakhs per person.
Yep.
It's incredibly lucrative. Big criminal money.
So why is it so hard to shut them down? You said it's like whack-a-mole.
A big part of it is enforcement challenges. Sometimes corruption plays a role, weak oversight. It makes it hard to tackle effectively. Plus, even when agents are caught, the penalties might not be harsh enough to really deter them, given how much money they can make. They might just pay a fine, serve a short time, and then pop up again somewhere else.
So what's the answer?
Much tougher laws, for starters. Penalties that really hurt financially. And crucially, massive public awareness campaigns, really educating people, especially in those high migration areas, about the scams and the true dangers. Make them aware of what they're getting into.
This whole issue, it must have wider consequences for India's image globally, right? Beyond just the U.S. relationship.
Oh, definitely. This kind of news, the U.S. crackdown, the stories of illegal migration, it can affect how all Indian travelers and businesses are seen.
How so? Like more scrutiny?
Exactly. You could see legitimate travelers facing more questions, more hurdles when applying for visas. Indian businesses might face extra checks during trade deals. It's a potential drag on international engagement.
That's really unfair to the vast majority who follow the rules. Guilt by association, almost.
Precisely. And there's always the risk that other countries might see what the U.S. is doing and think, maybe we should tighten up too. It could make things generally more difficult for Indians traveling or working abroad.
And what about the impact inside India?
Domestically, large numbers of people leaving illegally and then potentially being deported. It clashes with the narrative of India as this rising economic power where opportunities abound It highlights uncomfortable realities about inequality and lack of opportunity in certain regions.
It creates a dissonance, doesn't it, between the national story and individual experiences.
A very noticeable one.
We've talked a lot about policy, economics, geopolitics, but we need to remember these are real people.
Absolutely crucial. We can't lose sight of the human element. These aren't just numbers in a report.
Yeah.
They're individuals, families,
Hmm.
people with dreams, hopes, often driven by desperation. The donkey route isn't an adventure. It's terrifying. People face exploitation, violence, detention.
And the families back home.
They're often devastated. They've sunk their life savings, maybe taken huge loans if their relative is deported or gets stuck somewhere, or worse. The financial and emotional toll is immense.
It's such a stark contrast, isn't it? India reaching for the stars with space tech, a leader in IT. And yet you have this stream of people feeling they have to risk everything on these dangerous, illegal routes just for a shot at a basic living wage somewhere else.
It highlights a profound disconnect, a gap between the national achievements and the lived reality for some citizens. It underscores the need to protect the vulnerable, even when they're seeking opportunities elsewhere.
So that leads us to the big question. What can India actually do? What's the path forward here?
Okay, several concrete steps seem necessary. First, mandatory licensing and regular, tough audits for all travel agents. No more voluntary schemes, real teeth, big penalties for illegal stuff.
Makes sense. What else?
Second, those public awareness campaigns we mentioned. Really get the word out loud and clear, especially in Punjab, Gujarat, Haryana, about the risks, the lies the agents tell.
Educate potential migrants.
Exactly. Third, and this is the long game, serious investment in job creation and equitable growth in those regions. Address the push factors. Make it so people don't feel they have to leave.
Tackle the root causes.
Precisely.
Anything else on the list?
Yes. Diplomatically, keep pushing for humane treatment of deportees. Ensure their rights are respected, as we discussed.
Right, dignity.
And finally, international cooperation. Work with the U.S., work with countries along those routes, share intelligence, coordinate efforts to break up these smuggling networks. It's a transnational problem.
It really sounds like it needs a multi-layered approach. No single silver bullet.
Absolutely not. It requires action on regulation, economic development, public education, diplomacy, and international law enforcement, all at once.
Now, one thing we touched on is remittances, the money sent back by Indians abroad. That's often seen as a huge positive, right? Billions of dollars.
It is a huge positive for the economy, no doubt. India is the world's top recipient of remittances. It props up household incomes, boosts foreign exchange reserves.
But how does that square with this issue?
Well, it's complex. Some of that remittance money is coming from people who migrated through irregular channels, maybe working in tough conditions. So while the money is welcome economically, you can't let the inflow obscure the human cost or the reputational damage associated with how some of that money might be generated. It doesn't justify exploitation or illegal routes.
It's a tricky balance.
Very tricky. The economic benefit is real, but it comes with these significant social and ethical considerations.
So maybe this U.S. pressure, this crackdown, maybe it's actually a wake-up call, an opportunity for India to tackle these issues more seriously.
You could definitely see it that way. It forces the issue onto the agenda. It's an opportunity for India to look inward, strengthen its systems, protect its citizens better, and address those economic disparities.
So ensuring people have viable dreams within India and that those who do go abroad can do so safely and legally, that's key to India's global standing.
Absolutely essential. If India wants to be seen as a truly responsible global leader, it needs to manage this migration challenge effectively and humanely. Protecting its own people, ensuring their aspirations aren't exploited, that's fundamental.
Okay, so let's recap quickly. We've got the U.S. tightening its stance on illegal migration. India's in the spotlight due to significant numbers. We see the drivers' lack of jobs, hope for better elsewhere, leading to dangerous donkey routes run by rogue agents.
Right.
The U.S. actions, like potential visa curbs, are a clear signal to India to step up.
A direct message, yeah.
And India's response needs to be more than just words. It needs real action. Regulating agents, awareness campaigns, tackling root economic causes, and ensuring humane treatment for deportees.
A comprehensive strategy.
Because ultimately, this isn't just about U.S.-India relations. It impacts India's global image, its economy, and crucially, the lives and safety of its own citizens.
Exactly. Which really leaves us, and you listening, with a challenging thought, doesn't it? How do we, as societies, balance that basic human drive for a better life, that individual aspiration with a nation's need to manage its borders and protect its people from dangerous exploitation, especially when those aspirations lead people down such risky paths.
Yeah, that's a deep question. No easy answers there. It really speaks to the huge complexity of global migration today.
It does. A complexity we'll likely keep exploring in future deep dives as things continue to shift.